Thank you. And I want to thank Travis and the organizers here. I think they've put on a great show to get so many people out, particularly on a Sunday, to listen to Dave and my colleague Stu Vaith over here, who's kind of running our North American business. But at any rate, thanks. Really a time, and in many respects, I've met a lot of folks this week who have called friends in the industry. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Andre Boyson, who is probably one of the godfathers of this thing. Andre's sitting right in front here. But we were just talking a little bit about the fact that, 10 years ago, we thought we were going to nail this thing together. And, are we any closer? Is it a year away, or is another 10? And I think we all agreed that the tech is there. It's all coming together. It's probably now the business side, right? Beginning to kind of gel and make a difference, right? And this is, in many respects, not so much about the tech, but it's actually about what we do with it, how we begin to align. Because this is not anything that we or a government or a bank or a M&O or a fintech can solve, and that's kind of the key thing. For me, my journey on this thing started, in fact, 20 years ago. I was in Bankers Trust, and we created a spin-out company called CertCo, and we were trying to create a bank consortium to deal with anchored trust and tech and PCs and smart cards, and begin to deal with a one use case, which was trade finance, international commercial transactions. And it became pretty clear we were much earlier than our time in 1997 when we kind of got IdenTrust going. But those topics of security and authentication and really continue with us. And as Dave kind of pointed out on Sunday, this old trite Peter Steiner cartoon is still with us from 1993, amazingly. As I started looking at this topic, I met Andre back in 2012, and it fundamentally just got me very lit up over what I felt was the discouraging area, right? Here's a way to actually begin pulling this together. And we were talking to banks and governments, and kind of the track was, gee, let's go take your bank credential, and let's use that to log into the tax authority. And we ended up having the banks look at us cross-eyed and the government look at us cross-eyed, and we kind of kept at it. And everyone began realizing that's actually a pretty good idea. And it worked pretty well. It was low tech. And it was really a nice way to get started, right? It started very simple. And so we all ended up persevering. I think everyone in this room has probably got stories much like that. For me, a next inflection point actually occurred in mid-2007. Mastercard gave me a call. They were interested in creating a new business looking at digital identity, and really for probably three key reasons. And the first, I'll tell you again by way of a story, is that the company back in 2006 had actually made a pretty big commitment in forming what's called Mastercard Foundation. And at that point, our CEO and our executives were very committed to trying to make things better, and to make things better because we actually could. We had the resources and the scale and the breadth. And Mastercard Foundation was really aimed at financial inclusion. And that's a pretty long commitment, 13 years. A lot has transpired since that point. It's one of the largest private foundations of its kind out there, founded by a corporate entity. And it was really all about trying to make a big difference in people's lives with financial inclusion. And we began to learn that financial inclusion was actually driven in many respects by identity inclusion, right? Stories over and over and over again about employees of certain companies that were paid in cash at kind of the end of the day or the end of the week. And some of these US companies in some other parts of the world didn't know who they were employing, right? So we began inch by inch by inch trying to work to change that. And still to this day, as we all know, more than 1 billion people around the world aren't on the registry, right? They're just not there, not new news to any of us here. The second thing that we began to see is that digital payments at the end of the day are all driven by identity. And the world is now and will begin rapidly shifting to one where we're kind of checking in and not checking out. And we felt that was obviously an important reason a couple of years ago to dive into this area. And the third is that we certainly looked around the globe and we saw lots of interesting pockets of work being done in countries with fintechs, with bank consortiums and others, but not with scale, not efficient, not ubiquitous, not really meeting the needs of true customers that wanted to know, is it really Dave out there? And so this really notion that Mastercard, as a company that has been pretty good at dealing with multi-stakeholder management, kind of caught us. And at that point, our senior management became very impatient in the sense that we were talking, not doing. And I was asked quite gladly to join an initiative in 17, driven by our CEO, Ajay Banga, who, by the way, if you've never had the chance to meet or hear speak, is probably one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. So mission here is really all about trying to address that. At the end of the day, and I should probably just mention that this title is the title of a white paper that we published. So the points I'll try to make today, very, very briefly, are really laid out in that paper. It's up on our website and downloadable and all. And there was a press release that came out this morning about it. So that's the news, right? The news isn't high grade. We're going to country X, Y, and Z, and we're just going to launch a project in the Federal Republic of Utopia. We're not announcing that today. What we're actually talking about is the fact that we're making a bit of the bold move to declare that we're in this business and we're thinking about it in a certain way, but we're at the start of that journey. So that's probably an important point. And this actually from a company that has been around for a bit, for 50 years, right? I mean, when you kind of take a look at our history of both innovation in dealing with related topics, right? Of starting early on with paper and plastic and moving to mag stripes and moving to holograms and moving to chips and moving to tokens, right? Over our history, we've tried to react and deal with the times and how we're dealing with the payment business, right? So this has been a journey we're taking, and this is a pretty substantive step now in saying, well, digital ID is going to lead all. And it's not about putting something else on a credit card, right? It's about thinking differently. So this one, in some respects, is a very important departure, right? And it's a departure that as I'll describe, we'll take for some transactions and interactions that are not about payment, right? This is a company, for all of you that may not know, that operates in 200 countries and territories. And when I first heard that, I'm like, well, I don't even know if they're 200 countries, but there are some territories that count into that mix. It's a company that's partnered with 23,000 banks around the world, right? Some of the biggest. Some of them we're very, very close with. And we've served 50 million merchants. And many of those, an airline and a hotel and a sharing economy company and a digital goods company, are merchants, but they have a lot of other interesting things that obviously are done. And what we've in fact done is to work to make that simple, right? And simple is where it's at, even for all of us. Can we get to the point where this stuff is as simple as the rotary dial phone? I dial Dave, ringy, ringy, Dave comes online, and off we go. So can we ever get to that point where this stuff is simple rules, right? We've done a pretty good job at making what is ultimately a complex thing relatively simple amongst many, many stakeholders. We are, and how we're approaching this, really working to serve people, right? People in a lot of walks of life with a lot of different types of devices in their hand, in their pocket, or not, and in different ways of interacting. And I'd say one of the challenges is also to say that the world is not stopping, right? One of the big things we're probably going to see in a lot of years forward is most of our interactions just with voice, at home, in the car, in other arenas, and God forbid, probably not walking around with a clunky device like this, right? May not be the way we're interacting. So we're thinking ahead whilst trying to begin the journey now and making a difference with customers. we will have to address also, as Dave pointed out on Sunday, the bots, because the bots are coming. And who are they, and how do I interact with them, and what do they mean, and how are they certified, and what can they do? And I'd actually like to know that I'm talking to a bot, not talking to Louis. We're also striving to do what we're doing in a very user-centric manner, and we think that's particularly important. That brings strong value as well to those that people are interacting with, and doing this as we do our work in a collaborative fashion. We're by no means the type of organization that can solve this problem alone. There isn't anybody here belonging to an organization that can actually solve this on their own, right? So collaboration is ultimately king. There was a really fantastic talk that I heard in Berlin back in the fall by Rachel Botsman from Oxford, who described trust as the confident relationship with the unknown. And I've thought about that a lot since that point, and it does hark back to what are we really trying to deal with, right? I mean, there are lots of unknowns these days, but this process of trusting is at the heart of this whole thing. And we spent a lot of time stepping back from this. Dave actually did a wonderful thing by brokering trust. He's obviously an older and a more famous guy than I. Everybody probably knows Dave. And Dave ended up bridging some trust when I came on stage, right? So who is this guy, Walton? Well, you probably had a reasonable degree of confidence that I was Charlie, that I do work for Mastercard, and that hopefully I was not about to bore you for 30 minutes. That's what Dave did for me. And it's really that vouching for aspect of what this is all about that's pretty key. And so probably enough there. We've begun to think about the user by way of user centricity, user-centric, consumer-centric. We're all going to have to work on these words, right? But it's my Uncle Joe, right? We've tried to design what we're doing here for Uncle Joe, to make it simple, to put him at the center of the equation, to not take Uncle Joe's data, to not be dealing with data analytics around that. But let's put the user at the center. And if we can put the user at the center, we've actually got a good chance to bring them along and create a great relationship with lots of other value-added products and services that sit above this layer. And as much as we think we're doing great stuff, we're all at the foundation of all the cool stuff that we and others are going to be able to invent on top of it. We've really worked to actually describe in this paper, and I'm not going to dive into this, but a handful of principles, things that actually on my second day at Mastercard, I sat down with Ajay Banga, banging his shoe on the table, talking about don't forget about the user and don't forget about the user. And he went on a whatever for a period of time and described all the things that we better do. And I ended up writing them down on day 2. And it's evolved a bit as things do in a big company. But we got to these 10 things, right? It's not a Bill of Rights. Well, it's not a 10 Commandments either, although there are 10. But I'll let you read about them. But it is things like transparency and simplicity. It's about treating Uncle Joe the way we would want to be treated, right? And that's where we've come from. And that created a really, really challenging problem to our product people, to Prashant Sharma, who's leading our product activity here, in designing something that actually was consistent with this, right? Which is to say, well, we can't have an account and we're not going to hold this or that or that. And the answer is no, we're not going to create an account. We're not going to hold any data at all, right? We're going to orchestrate and bridge. It's very important to not get creepy with this stuff. And we just think, again, you can't bring the user along if you're creepy. No big data in the sky, no other way of holding or dealing with data. The use, I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact that there's just hundreds of things that we can all invent and think about doing, from the notion of checking in at a place. Hi, it's Charlie, here's my stuff. Or hi, I'm a guy that's 42 years old, Dave. In the financial inclusion environment, who my friend Shemek is trying to work to solve, you got a very different set of problems. I'm kind of showing up here naked, and I actually have my Uncle Joe with me. How do I deal with that one, right? A little easier if we got a big fat file and we live in New York or San Francisco, but a problem for that refugee. But it's opening the bank account, it's doing the background check, it's making life easier for people. It's confirming a bit about who I am, and perhaps using that to create a different way of talking to either the bots or the other guy on the other end of the line in an intelligent way that I kind of control with the right sort of handrails that I can trust, like the dial tone or like that little orange and yellow circle at the bottom, but to create a frame of trust going forward, right? And that's what we're really trying to do here. And when you think about that, those sorts of interactions can become pretty powerful. The way in which a merchant might talk to me, okay? The way that I might be presented with an offer or an advertisement. I'm more involved and I've got greater permission. The system model that we've contemplated, we really tried to decompose, right? This whole thing is all of the geeks I included would say that this is all about the user interacting with this relying party. And if that could only be the case, problem solved, but we know that can't. The example I gave with Dave vouching for Charlie was all about an identity verification provider. And if we could have those three interact, problem solved, right? The government and the bank and the M&O and the university who vouch for Charlie, okay? Great if that could be the case. That can't be the case. If it's user-centric, I also need tools. As far as I know right now, for 5 billion people, the best tool we've got is a mobile device or a tablet. That's the best device. It's got security, it's got biometrics built into it, and there's only two ways of dealing with that on a mobile device or dealing with managing stuff on the mobile device, and that is through an app and it's through an operating system. So we sort of describe this idea of a trust provider, someone that can provide the tools out to the user as this trust provider. So that brings another element to bear. And not that this was Mastercard thinking about the problem, because we didn't start this way. We didn't start by saying, how can we get in the middle of everything? That was not the thought process, but what we've discovered is that there's a problem. There's an orchestration problem. You can have a self-organized system, an internet of identity, which, God, I hope we get to at a point in time. And we will be working very hard along those lines. It's a really, really important track, and we'd be thrilled to find that we get there. But in the meanwhile, we do think that there's a business level of commercial governance that's actually needed, a digital identity service provider, so to speak. Now, this model is role-based, and you say, well, gee, I'm running an IDP in the Federal Republic of Utopia. How would I play into this? Well, a traditional IDP looks like a trust provider and identity verification providers together. So role-based, we're kind of covering there. If I'm running a scheme in the Federal Republic of Utopia and it's all solved, how do we play? There's no reason for us to win and compete against that, but maybe we can help with scale locally, and maybe we can help with scale globally by collaborating. So what this is all about is trust providers. It might be a retail bank, it might be a mobile network operator, it might be a university. We got many identity verification providers who have primary relationship with people, the passport office, the bank, the DMV, the mobile network operator, and others. This is about a collaboration play. Our role we see to be about building a frame, building a market, creating global acceptance, setting up some rules and business rules, about delivering a highly granular capability down to a relying party. You need to prove that Prashant's over 21. Let's just deal with the facts about Prashant being over 21. There's a lot of other stuff I don't have to do. And if I can do that in a fast, real-time way, I've gotten pretty efficient about it. the set of organizations that we will have to deal with in many respects to pull off what we're trying to pull off with what we describe in this paper is staggering, right? But it's not as staggering or any more staggering than what we've dealt with over 50 years, right? It is about bringing multi-stakeholder together for a common end. And the common end is Uncle Joe interacting with the bank or Airbnb or a merchant or Walmart.com or Netflix to create an end, and to create that end in a really simple, efficient, cost-effective way. So I'd say that collaboration is king. We also, to know, are pretty good at technology, but what we are largely doing is beginning to bring together best of in the market. We've started some work with Microsoft, which you probably had seen, we announced in December. That's an important part of the story, but there's many other parts of this, both now and over time. So collaboration is king, and we're going to need to work very closely with almost every organization or type of organization in this audience today. So what's next, and what might be my ask? I would say we're at the start. We're trying to describe what we think is a reasonable way to go. We've viewed this idea of even making an announcement right now a little bit edgy. Why should we bother to do this? And I felt it was actually important to just show that there can be a way, an anchor, a market maker, to help bring together what a lot of us have been trying to do for a long period of time. We won't be the only one, that's very much for sure. And it's probably all up to us to execute like hell to try to make a difference with some small steps in the near term that comes. I'd ask that if anyone would like to talk and would like to explore, we're really open right now. The book is not completely written. We've set down what's important, but there's a lot of work to do. And with that, I thank you very much, and I'll turn things back to Dave.